Welcome to the Worthy and Unworthy channel. On this channel, we talk about geopolitical issues and try to approach them from a perspective a little bit different from that offered by the mainstream media. This week's video, titled Broken Nest, Taiwan's Chip Industry and U.S. Self-Interest, will discuss some recent changes, whereas the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company is proposing investments in the United States. And in this video, I'll talk about the wider geopolitical implications of this proposed investment. This week, Donald Trump welcomed C.C. Wei, the chief executive of TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, to the White House to announce a new $100 billion investment in production in the United States. This investment more than doubled the previous $65 billion investment that happened during the Biden administration. Currently, 3 TSMC manufacturing plants are under construction in Arizona, with at least some of them beginning operation this year. This new investment is projected to expand this construction to 3 more plants. For Donald Trump, TSMC's decision represents a preemptive victory in his latest tariff war. While the president has yet to institute any tariffs against Taiwan, he has threatened them in the past. In particular, Taiwan was concerned that they might be included in the reciprocal tariffs that Trump had proposed launching in April. To see a country figuratively surrendering before any shots had been fired suggests that Trump's tariffs can indeed achieve what he says they intend to achieve: more jobs and more business activity within the United States' borders. For many in Taiwan, the planned investment represents something more concerning. TSMC is the crowning jewel of Taiwan's economy and is indeed the most advanced chip manufacturing company in the world. Being a so-called fab, it operates not by designing its own chips, but rather having the capability of producing chips for other companies like Apple and Nvidia. The potential that more of this capability, especially the capability of producing TSMC's most advanced and smallest microchips, could threaten Taiwan's economy. The impressive story of how Morris Chang, TSMC's founder, who was born in mainland China and educated in the United States, went from being passed over for a promotion by Texas Instruments, a company that I know because of the expensive calculators I had to buy when I was in middle and high school, to leading one of the world's most amazing companies, is told in the excellent book Chip Wars. The importance of TSMC to Taiwan cannot be overstated. Taiwan's economy is heavily export dependent, with exports representing close to 70% of Taiwan's GDP. This means that Taiwan will be impacted by changes in trade with close partners or when operations move overseas more than other less export-oriented economies would be. To make this point more clear, the semiconductor industry, which TSMC dominates in Taiwan like it does globally, represents between 13 and 15% of Taiwan's GDP. A large portion of the economy's growth in recent years has been driven by growth in the semiconductor industry. Because of the export dependence of Taiwan's economy, it has been vulnerable to trade restrictions placed on mainland China by the United States. During the Biden administration, the United States began preventing companies that do business with U.S. companies, including TSMC, from selling the most advanced chips to China. Before these restrictions, exports in general from Taiwan to mainland China and Hong Kong have increased from about 20% of Taiwan's total exports in the early 2000s to a peak of nearly 50% in 2020. Since then, there has been a declining trend. In February of this year, the United States overtook mainland China as an export destination, but I suspect some of this was driven by increased purchasing in anticipation of Trump's tariffs. For this reason, some commentators and politicians in Taiwan have suggested that the economy may be collateral damage of economic clashes between mainland China and the United States. Just to make more clear the level of economic integration between mainland China and Taiwan, even in the controversial realm of semiconductors, Taiwan has invested in mainland China. TSMC has manufacturing plants in both Shanghai and Nanjing. While these plants do not make the most advanced chips, they are significant producers of larger, less advanced chips. While many have cautioned against Taiwan's economic overexposure to mainland China, the recent threats of tariffs and TSMC's investments in the United States raise an important question regarding Taiwan's economic overexposure to the United States. There is something essential to understand about the United States' relationship with Taiwan and ultimately all of its allies. The red line for the United States always comes down to its own self-interest. The people of Taiwan are clear-eyed about this. A 2023 poll found that 55% of the island's people did not think the United States was trustworthy, compared to 33.9% who did. Another poll found that 58.6% agreed that no matter how much support the United States has given to Taiwan, it does so out of its own self-interest, which might not be the same as Taiwan's interest, compared to 25.8% who disagreed. These polls are consistent with growing skepticism of the United States in Taiwan. U.S. politicians have not done much to help with this growing cynicism. In one extreme instance, Seth Moulton, a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts, labeled the idea of blowing up TSMC and the event of an invasion from the mainland an interesting idea. Moulton's comment even led to a reaction from Taiwan's defense minister, who stated that Taiwan would not tolerate such bombings. Moulton was not the first U.S. political figure to make such a threat. Robert O'Brien, who served as National Security Advisor during the first Trump administration, made comments similar to Moulton's, where he compared the strategy to the United Kingdom's destruction of the French Navy during World War II, which was done to prevent it from coming into the hands of Nazi Germany. This strategy is laid out explicitly in a paper published by the United States Army War College Press, which proposed a so-called broken nest approach to deterring a Chinese invasion. I am not going to read the full quote, but you can see the main details of the proposal on the screen. Surely there are better ways of preventing war than threatening to destroy the economy of Taiwan. It is no wonder that many in Taiwan are skeptical of the United States when politicians from both parties and military strategists are threatening to destroy their country in such ways, even if these threats are framed as being deterrent strategies. Threats like these made Mark Liu, the former CEO of TSMC, to make this statement during an interview with the New York Times. China will not invade Taiwan because of semiconductors. China will not invade Taiwan because of semiconductors. It is really up to the United States and China. How do they maintain the status quo, which both sides want? So that leads us back to the investment with which I started this video. Donald Trump has frequently accused Taiwan of stealing the semiconductor manufacturing industry from the United States and threatened tariffs to bring the industry back. Trump's claims are of course false. He repeated this claim as recently as last week. Taiwan's chip industry developed with significant government support under the leadership of Morris Chang, as already mentioned. The real question should be whether the United States is trying to steal a significant proportion of Taiwan's chip industry. During the Biden administration, the CHIPS and Science Act sought to develop the United States' domestic chip industry. The act supported the TSMC projects in Arizona. Traditionally, Taiwan has kept the manufacture of its most advanced, smallest chips at home. Taiwan's Minister of Economics decided that 2-nanometer chips, among the smallest, could not be produced by TSMC outside of Taiwan, stating, "Since Taiwan has related regulations to protect its own technologies, TSMC cannot produce 2-nanometer chips overseas currently." However, the Arizona plan has called this previous policy into question. It seems clear that 2-nanometer chips and maybe more advanced chips that might be possible in the future will be made in Arizona. At the press conference when Trump announced the deal, he said the most powerful AI chips in the world will be made right here in America, and will be a big percentage of the chips made by his company. Wei's statement was a little bit less clear. We are producing the most advanced chips made on U.S. soil with the success of our first fab. If you go to the TSMC website's page about the Arizona plants, you will find the following. The recently announced third fab will manufacture chips using 2-nanometer or even more advanced processes technology. This chart just shows changes in the smallest microchips over time. As you can see, as of 2025, 2-nanometer chips are indeed the smallest in production. And in the future, there might be smaller chips produced, but if the Arizona plants are making 2-nanometer chips this year, then they are indeed making the most advanced chips. There is one other wrinkle to this story that I want to add. While TSMC is moving some production to the United States, the US is also asking for Taiwan to start spending more money on its defense. This week at a Senate confirmation hearing, Trump's nominee for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Eldridge Colby, suggested that Taiwan should be spending close to 10% of its GDP on defense. Right now, Taiwan spends about 2.2% of its GDP on defense, a quarter of this number. 10% of GDP is also far below the United States, which spends about 3.4% of its GDP on defense, and much lower than almost any other country. It is amazing to see a nominee for the administration suggest such a high number, while the U.S. is also engaging in trade policies that may threaten Taiwan's economy. It is also worth noting that any increases in defense spending will likely mean increases in profits for U.S. defense contractors. There is opposition to these policies in Taiwan. The nationalist Kuomintang, KMT, which is the majority party in Taiwan, while the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, hold the presidency, in particular has expressed concerns about the potential for 2-nanometer and smaller chip manufacturing moving to the United States. There still are a lot of open questions about what this policy ultimately might mean. TSMC still does need final approval from the Taiwanese government before investment can happen, so there are still questions about whether we will actually be seeing the full investment and when it will actually proceed, and whether there'll be approval for these smaller chips to actually start being manufactured. There are also questions about how successful the U.S. fabs will be. When it was announced that they were being built in Arizona, I was surprised about that because water is a big part of the production of these fabs, and Arizona is a relatively dry state. I did see videos from the fab where they actually did talk about how they have a system for recycling water, so it does not actually seem like it might be an issue. But there are also other questions about having the skilled labor to be producing these microchips and how available that actually is in the United States. There has been a lot of labor that actually has been moving from Taiwan to the United States to at least be training employees in the production of the microchips. And the big question, again, the one I've been talking a lot about with this video, is what impact this will actually have for Taiwan. What will it mean for Taiwan's economy? What will it mean for the extent that they are, to the extent they are an export-focused economy, and what this will mean in the future for their export and their chip industry more broadly. There are also questions about what impact this will have on Taiwan-US relations. I think right now, and I'm hoping to make a video about this in the future, there's a lot of questions about what exactly it does mean to be aligned with the US geopolitically and how secure exactly is that. And it might be the case that in the future, Taiwan might see the benefits of this relationship not being as strong as they might have perceived them in the past. And the big lurking question, one thing that I haven't talked about, or sort of talked around a little bit in this video, is what this exactly means for mainland China. What does this mean for the relationships, the cross-strait relationships between mainland China and Taiwan, and how does this also relate to the wider geopolitical controversies between the United States and China? Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting or useful in some ways. If you have any questions or any comments or suggestions, I'm certain there are things that I missed or parts of the story that might need more attention. Please feel free to comment on the video. If these types of topics are interesting to you, especially topics related to geopolitics and how the media covers these stories, I'll recommend a book that I recently published called Worthy and Unworthy: How the Media Reports on Friends and Foes. In this book, I really apply the perspective from Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky in their book, Manufacturing Consent, to looking how the media are really comparing how the media reports on stories from geopolitical enemies and from geopolitical foes. And what I find basically is that there's much more of a focus, especially on negative stories that are coming from geopolitical foes, even when similar events happen in countries that are more friendly to the United States. So if you're interested in looking into that book more, I provide a URL and also a QR code to go to the publisher's website to take a look at the book. Thank you so much, and like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments. Thanks, everyone.